Picked a little jam music since we're here in the MedTech jam session.
Love it.
All right, so welcome.
Hello, everyone.
MedTech jam session with Chris and Mike D. I'm Mike Donahue.
I'm Chris Lyons. Good to be heard.
Yeah, sorry I introduced you right as you were taking a sip of whatever it is you're drinking at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Day drinking on a Tuesday.
It's pure water.
Not that I'm judging. Well,
good to see you.
We are super excited for today's episode. We've had some really great guests. We've had some amazing founders from Mark Foster and Ken Gall and Tom Gamache, and we've got many more down the road, but we're pivoting a little bit, but not completely, and inviting an investor. And he's not only an investor, he's an orthopedic spine surgeon who is making a second career move and moving into the world of venture capital, the wide world of VC. Chris, I'll let you introduce you guys.
Everybody needs to tune in for this one. And I will definitely introduce Dr. Paul Slosar.
Let her rip.
Yeah, so Paul is truly an entity that is known well, especially in the spine industry. But even since that time, and now continuing to build on his entire resume into funding and venture funding and working through the PhyCap fund under the banner of 46 Ventures is extremely awesome for somebody that literally has been in practice most of his career. And a pivot of this nature is not uncommon, but it's also bold. And that's what I love about it, is the fact that he's going to be able to teach others, right, that have been down the same pathway, whether they're in practice right now, considering retiring from practice, or whatever the case is. I really believe there's a ton of docs out there that are going to want to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We're excited to have him. So let's welcome to the MedTech Studio Jam Session stage, Dr. Paul.
Wow. Yeah. Can I get that button for my wife? Because I don't hear that kind of applause at home anymore. But I don't know about you guys, but I need that button on my phone.
I totally agree, man.
Yeah, this is the one you probably get. Yeah, that's the one you get, Dr. Slosar. We all get that one.
That's the live studio audience.
I love it. Well, pleasure to be here. Thank you for that kind introduction, Chris.
Absolutely, man. You've done a ton. It's a lot to be admired. And not only that, if you were still practicing and I had issues, I'd come out to UCSF. I'd come out and have whatever I needed taken care of. But it's exciting because of the time that we're getting to spend, not only prior to that when you were in practice, I was in corporate, but even since then, the opportunities of growth and expansion and the ability to help, whether it's individuals, companies, or everybody in between, has just been an absolute pleasure to be doing this alongside of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the journey has not been one that has been, how shall I say it, just this linear plan that I dreamed up 30 years ago. A lot of it is being opportunistic, and I don't mean that in a predatory way, but having the courage to seek opportunities, and when certain opportunities present, having the courage and the appropriate amount of skepticism prior, but having the courage to jump and make a move, of which I did my most recent jump out of the Bay Area and into Park City. But it's been a tremendous journey, and getting networked and introduced to people like Mike through you is an enormous pleasure at this point in my career. The network that now I'm building, leaning into, I really didn't envision it even as short as 5 years ago.
Why don't you provide, Dr. Slosar, if you don't mind, provide some background into your clinical career and what has led you to this date. I'm curious to understand, before we get into your current activities, talk a little bit about your time as a clinician and how your practice evolved over the last, sounds like 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I practiced a total of 28 years, Mike. So 2 years ago, I stopped clinical practice. I didn't, people had said retired. I guess retired from clinical practice is accurate, but really pivoted and took an opportunity to do something unique. But I actually grew up in Chicago, grew up on the south side of Chicago. My mom and dad were teachers. I ended up going to medical school at Rush, trained at Loyola for orthopedics. And then I did my spine fellowship out in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1994 with a really cool private academic group, as they're referred to now, private-emic group. It was back in the day when being in private practice was cool and desirable. And I had made a decision even that point in ortho, whether to go university versus private practice. And I am entrepreneurial. I like managing my business, as it were. And so I was attracted to the private practice side, but I wanted to be in something that was much bigger than just a typical practice. So anyway, I returned to Chicago after my fellowship training, but I quickly realized that I was just in a normal, nice little orthopedic practice, right? And so I was like, oh man, I could see my whole next 30 years laid out in front of me from a very predictable perspective. So I actually leaned into universities. I thought maybe I would go that way because I wanted the challenge, the academic challenge. I was good at research, and the group ended up recruiting me back to the Bay Area because the senior guy, Arthur White, who was a pretty famous spine surgeon, one of the early presidents of NASS, the North American Spine Society, he trained me. So I actually took over his practice. I came in, and at the time we had, four or five spine surgeons. We had 3 pain management doctors. We had a chiropractor. We had fellowship training program. We had a full-time spinal research department and a great multidisciplinary team, psychiatrists in our practice. It was unbelievable. So that exposure allowed me to, and allowed our practice to be viewed as one of the preeminent practices in the US at the time. We were in FDA trials. We wrote a bunch of clinical outcomes. And then, the early 2000s, the spine technology started to J-curve. That was exactly when pedicle screws and rods and interbody cages, BMP, all that came out. So I was lucky enough to be around and courageous enough to stick my neck out and work with companies in the startup space. And the rest those were the foundational aspects of how I got to where I am today.
How do you assess as a clinician when a company or somebody brings you a new technology as yet unproven? It sounds like you were around during the days of, as you said, the pedicle screws and BMP and a lot of really advanced technologies coming out at a very rapid pace. How do you process new technologies and decide how you want to implement them in your practice?
Well, I think retrospect gives me the perspective of having different time frames to fall back on. So as a senior level surgeon in my last, let's say, 10 years of my practice, a technology had a much higher bar to be integrated into my practice because I had the benefit of my previous 20 years of seeing, trying things, et cetera. So you develop a sense of what are the gaps in your practice? What do you need? And how hard it is to change something. So it has to be meaningfully better. And contrast that, Mike and Chris, with and any surgeon, even currently, is in their younger parts of their practice, where if a technology seems to be appealing to them and they're interested in being part of the ecosystem of product development, advisory roles, of learning how these companies may progress through their life cycle, finding technologies that are earlier in their development, yet represent the next potential generation of things that you can lean in on. It's a tremendous opportunity. And so you can be a little less selective in terms of saying, oh, this has to definitely move the needle, where these companies are often in desperate need of objective, critical thinkers, people who do well in the lab, educate other surgeons well, provide guidance to the engineers. So if you're that kind of MedTech surgeon trying to learn the trade, you're not going to get a lot of traction leaning into highly mature companies with very mature portfolios. I would imagine, Chris, you would echo that advice?
Totally agree. Totally. It's almost like we're seeing another stage now
Yeah.
as it relates to, okay, we've tried every type of material known to man. We've tried every approach to put something into the spine. We've tried this, we've tried that. And sure, there's the advent of AI and things of that nature. But I still think there are solid solutions and workable business models that are still not in the public eye yet that are on the horizon.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that in the context of MedTech, and I just came from a big investor founder meeting, the LSI meeting in Dana Point, and it was a sponge of just basically listening and listening more than speaking. But the industry of medicine, it always goes through, and I saw this as another part of the reason where I thought, okay, in my late 50s, it was probably time, and now I'm 62, time to pivot out before I got too old. But I knew, like, at this, every 10 years, you got to learn a new technology. The bar goes up, things get minimally invasive. They might get robotically driven. Probably the next thing they're going to get AI augmented. So the docs who want to stay current and stay up, considered on the circuit of key opinion leaders, thought leaders, you have to keep iterating. You have to keep staying current, which takes a lot of effort. And I did that almost 3 to 4 times in my career, these 7 to 10 year intervals. And I saw the next one coming, and I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna go do something else, like, something simple, like try to raise a venture fund, right?
You're probably finding that's not so simple.
Hi, listeners. As a MedTech leader, you know how hard it is to scale up your sales team and prepare them for a successful product launch. If your reps are still digging through cumbersome shared drives and web portals, clicking through an LMS that no one uses, or relying on email newsletters to stay current, it's time for a change. Your reps, they're on the move. They need on-the-go content and a single source of truth. And that's where Convey Connect comes in. It's a mobile-first, company-branded app that gives your sales team instant access to training, sales tools, and company updates all in one place. At Convey Connect, we can have your customized, white-labeled mobile app deployed to the app stores in just a few weeks, so your sales team is resourced and aligned to win. So if you're scaling your team or prepping for a big launch, please check out conveymed.io, schedule a quick demo. We would love to show it to you. So now back to the show.
You raise a really important point, Paul, which is the relationship, particularly in the surgical specialties, the relationship between the surgeon inventors, and the company. Companies, whether they know it or not, and most do, and most really good ones really do, need to have a very deep relationship with the physicians as they are developing the product, because you may have a great idea, but that idea can be built upon, and you need to bring the experts in the room to do that. Sounds like you've had some experience with that.
I have. I've been fortunate enough, like I said, so being in the Bay Area from 96 to 2022.
Hot time.
Oh my God, right? There's just a ton of money pouring into venture, private equity, all the tech companies, and they know healthcare is a huge part, right? Whatever it is, 17, 20% of the economy, the GDP. And they're like, wow, we can iterate in here. I learned how to do due diligence for some of these companies, right? They would call on me, they'd say, hey, we've got this spine technology, sometimes orthopedic, or even a concept of like surgery centers in spine. And I would lean in and learn the questions they would ask me. I would learn from, because I wouldn't necessarily think to ask those. Now, you guys are on that side of it. But the idea of teaching docs the trade of how to do due diligence, yet then how does a company get going from the back of the napkin to hopefully an exit, right? If you're in for that, or just become a good company. So I worked with Kyphon. I worked with Sophomore Danik before Medtronic acquired it. I worked with SCA that exited to Optum. I worked with Relievant. That was a pure startup, took 14 years. They exited to Boston. And then I was the chief medical officer for Titan Spine, which was acquired by Medtronic. So I had this really extraordinarily diverse yet methodical exposure to these things. But when you're inside, like a lot of docs, I think, forget, there's just a ton of awful, grindy, non-glamorous work in
Mhm.
startups, you're just part of the team. If you don't play well on a team, if you can't collaborate, if you can't take the doctor hat off and be approachable to these companies, they will fail because of your lack
Mhm.
of ability to do that. And I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of my colleagues who've been very successful, but they get pulled into projects for their name, right? And their revenue because they're so busy. But
Yep.
I was a little less busy than some of my colleagues like at UCSF. And I had assist privileges, Chris, at UCSF. I took my complicated cases up there, but I ran a private practice and worked at 4 different hospitals and a surgery center in my career. So I was used to grinding it out. And that's, to me, that's more fun, and you get better at your trade if you're actually in the part of the sausage making that isn't as glamorous as just the marquee sign at NAS.
No doubt. And I would say too, to that point, as we think about the next generation, the younger generation that's coming on right now, right? A lot of the learnings that we've had, we need to see that being reinvented with this next group. And coming back to some key words that you've used, even in the short time on the discussion, of being methodical about how you do what you do. Your desire to be a surgeon was one thing, your desire to be more than that was another. And I think that is a key thought process of diversification that would be awesome to see this generation can take seriously, not just to be about, yes, you're there for the patient. I get it, right? But there's so much more that you bring to the table that you don't even know that you bring unless you step out in courage, right? Embrace the unknown, not in the effort of building a name, but building better outcomes. And I think
Yeah.
by default, being that intentional is going to lead to this next generation of being hopefully stalwarts in this space of ortho and spine, right?
Yeah, I as I've looked back at it, like I said, I grew up in this normal neighborhood on the south side, and only a few guys I know went to medical school, right? A very few. Some, maybe half, didn't even go to college, right? They ended up on the board of trade or cops, firefighters, etc. But I always, somewhere deep inside of me, I always wanted to do something different. And when I would do something like a tremendous accomplishment, getting into med school, getting into ortho, then I thought, well, yeah, everybody does this, but I want to do something that they aren't doing. So I was always not like fulfilled. I was
Yep.
totally fulfilled, happy, taking good care of my patients. If that's the best top, that's great. But there are people around
Yes.
who push my buttons, if you will, and I get motivated, and I get a little bit of fear of missing out. I see something that I think I can contribute to. And let's be clear, I really enjoy the success that comes with getting companies over a finish line, getting them acquired, being part of that story. And so I think for the people who are listening to this, who are either the MedTech founders, who are the operators, the COOs, the chief development officers, and the physicians who are part of this ecosystem, it is important to always push yourself hard, harder than maybe your peers. And those are the opportunities that come to those who are driving themselves. Now, I do think in this space, orthopedic spine is a very mature space now compared to where it
Mhm.
was 30 years ago. Healthcare delivery is somewhat fractured. The technology is great. We just can't get it to people very
Yeah.
efficiently. So I do think for docs, I always encourage the physicians who I mentor and coach on this stuff. I always tell them, do things in parallel to medicine. It's
Yes.
really important to be a good doctor, be the best doctor that you can be. It's a really important thing. And I'll tell you, it is way less glamorous on the other side of the fence. Don't think that being a consultant or a full-time advisor that you can just pop out and do that. It is very difficult. So do things in parallel to medicine with your career when you can still be a very good doctor and lean in. But where I'm going with this comment is I leaned in because there was no medical technology in spine when I came out. It was very much it was an unplowed field. Now it's got mature plants and roads and factories. What's
Mhm.
coming next, right? You got to look around those corners and you got to figure out in the technology delivery space what is coming next, because the companies that are founding now and maybe up and running now, the companies who acquire them are thinking 5 to 7 years in the future. So if you want to just layer in and help somebody develop the next best pedicle screw, well, good luck, but don't expect that to go anywhere other than maybe you just want to learn the craft and learn the trade of like what it's like to be in a company. But it's very unlikely that's going to go anywhere. You got to be listening, talking, networking. Docs do a terrible job of networking because they're know-it-alls and they don't really need to ask anyone for any advice, but feel free to ask guys like me or Chris or Mike as you're trying to figure out where is this space going, and be vulnerable, open up to ideas that you may not necessarily think are real because they might be real in 3 to 5 years.
Amen.
That's
100%,
great
man.
advice.
And
That's
getting
great
really
advice.
good at connecting the dots is what you did
Yeah.
and are doing.
Yeah. And they're not always obvious, right? I think that's the other thing, that I moved where one opportunity opened the door to another one, and another opportunity maybe failed. And then you have to backpedal. And not everything I have done has worked out. There's carnage on both sides of the road in things I've been involved in. But the part of the reason I landed now as a co-founder of a venture fund is because I opened myself up to a wide lens and didn't just stay completely narrow on just on one area of medicine. So, and I ended up going back to business school 2 years ago. So I took the next step in rounding out my resume, as it were, put some professional bona fides around the business. I had clearly innate, decent instincts and good skills at it, but there is an actual formal training process that has helped me and provided me with a lot of market reputation validity in the business world by going through the steps of going back to business school.
That's great.
That's very brave to go back to business school. I don't think I'd want to go back to school at my age. I'm curious to know, you're not a first-time investor, I suspect. You've probably invested in companies. Sounds like you've certainly participated in early-stage companies. But I gather that you are a first-time fund manager.
Yes, they fondly refer to that as an emerging fund manager, Mike. That means
you are an emerging fund manager.
Yeah, that's the code language. So I've sorted that out. But that doesn't. Well, the cool thing about the venture universe that I've learned, right, and I've immersed myself in it now for the last 18 months. Very much, I've read, I've learned. I go to meetings, I talk to people who are professional venture capitalists, et cetera. But they've all been emerging fund managers, right? Everybody in that space is very interesting. It's not as, how should I say it? It's not as really raw skeptical as surgeons are at each other. Surgeons are often extraordinarily honest with each other about how that's never going to work. And the venture world is a lot more, listen, it's not like it's kumbaya. They're in it to make money, but they're more nurturing, and they understand strength in numbers, because most of the times these investments are co-investments, right? It's
That's
multiple parties coming together, and you get a lot of collateral due diligence information if you are good at interacting with other people in other firms and if you're just plowing ahead alone. But to answer your question about investing, yeah, I'll be very honest with you. My single check investing has been crap, right? Like everybody's. The numbers I think are like 1 in 20, maybe it's 1 in 18 that tend to work. So I'm done with that. Like I'm done with that, to be honest. So on a very basic level, and a lot of maybe people on the call and on the meeting don't understand, but the power of venture capital on a very basic level is that you pool funds. So let's say everybody puts in $100,000 and you have a fund, $8 to $10 million. You divide that money over 18 to 20 company investments. So just right there, you've got 18 to 20 chips on the table versus one. So from a risk perspective, it's tremendous in terms of reducing the risk of a single event taking out one of your single investments. Secondly, the idea of pooling money together and getting advice from the network. We've in particular at Physicians Capital aimed to make a group of investors that are healthcare professionals. Some are docs, some are operators, some are sales and distribution people, some are healthcare executives, some have founded physician-owned hospitals, some have operated hospital systems and done value-based healthcare. So when you look at the complexity of the ecosystem, I've purposely put together people and have invited investors in, and we're still looking for investors. So anyone who's listening, please consider coming on board. But we believe very seriously that we can de-risk these deals by just having a pool of experienced, seasoned veterans, healthcare professionals across the spectrum.
Oh, I like that you're making it multidisciplinary. That makes sense. Not just physicians, but operators and people who have been out in the field in sales and distribution roles, because so many times that's where products go to die. So I heard a great quote from Scott Galloway. I don't know if you guys know Scott Galloway. He does a bunch of podcasts, he's written a bunch of books. And he was saying that the term entrepreneur, and you are an entrepreneur in addition to an emerging fund manager, he said that the synonym for entrepreneur is salesperson. So you're in sales now, whether you know it or not, you are in sales.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us what your pitch is to the LPs with whom you are recruiting to join your emerging fund.
No, and it's true that the idea of having an entity that you are promoting essentially puts you into a sales position. Now, on a very basic level, I'm the co-founder, right? So my capital is deployed. So I am 100% linked to the success of this entity. So this is my focus for the next 10, 15 years as an emerging fund manager. But to get to the pitch, we have two basically somewhat different groups of people who are looking to invest with us. One is the group that I mentioned earlier, the physician, healthcare professional who might not even understand the basic concepts of venture capital. So I go through what I just mentioned earlier with them in terms of explaining why I like this better, just from a risk perspective and from bringing a group of people together who often want access to startups. They want to advise startups. They don't know how to do it. They're in the middle of the country. There's not private equity firms or venture capital funds asking them to do it. They might get some fractional chief medical officer work. They want to sit on a board, but they don't know how to get into the space. So in terms of an investment, both groups, we're trying to make money, right? We're a venture capital fund. We're trying to return more than the capital you put in. We can't guarantee it. We don't have any way of guaranteeing, but our goal is to return a multiple of that. The next group are very experienced investors who've maybe been in the business side, been in the sales and distribution side, have had exits. What they want to know, they're like, yeah, I'm glad your doctors want to help all these companies, but I want to know why you're going to make a better return on investment for me versus another fund. First, we're going to be nimble. We're raising $8 to $10 million. So we can be very selective with our investments versus $100 million fund that has to get a lot of capital moving very quickly. It's a 10-year window. We invest in the first 2 to 3 years, and then we nurture these investments through exit and acquisition. So if you have $8 to $10 million, you can be much more selective. Number two, we work with 46 Venture Capital, which is a multi-fund management group. They are professional venture capital managers. They do the intellectual property analysis, legal, compliance, competitive landscape. The deal intake flows through them. They have analysts. So we have a fund manager that sits on top of our fund so that we can concentrate on doing the due diligence. And then lastly, we de-risk deals, both on the front end, as I mentioned, by having seasoned professionals like yourselves who look at deals from every angle. How does this work? How could this blow up? And then on the back end, we de-risk them from a product adoption perspective because we've got a pool of either physicians, administrators, practice managers, et cetera, who, if the product needs some pilot testing or some market adoption, which is essential in healthcare to getting things acquired, we can be a sandbox for those companies to access and play in and work out some of the bugs without the companies normally have to just go out on their own and find those docs, right? Chris advises a bunch of companies like that. And if they don't have access to a pool of people like us as an investor, obviously we'll make ourselves available. They have to go out and try to find those people independently. So for the sophisticated investors, we believe we bring what they call alpha, a competitive advantage by having a highly curated group of general partners and limited partners who are professionals in healthcare and having some sales and distribution market adoption pipelines built in. For the physicians who are curious about what do I want to do after medicine? How did you get in front of all these companies? We're creating an active network of education, access, teaching them the trade of venture capital and how to do due diligence. If they want to run point on a deal with me, they can, like my resident might, when I train fellows, they might run point and they can help me do the due diligence through these analyses. So we believe, number one, we can do better than just a venture firm made up of tech bros and finance bros who call on docs occasionally. And number two, we actually want to have some fun doing it. Short, we've got a great group of people in this ecosystem. They tend to be fragmented all over the place. So I'm trying to bring them into a ecosystem where we meet once a quarter, bring in a guest speaker, bring in somebody who is interesting and can educate all of us, and then take that education and put it to work.
That's great. One of the things too that I think you hit on, you just came up with an acronym, and I don't know if you realized you did. It's called Teach Them How to Eat, Educate, Access, Teach, right? That's what the focus should be, especially for anybody that's in our space. It's so dynamic, right? It's more exciting for me to look at where things are headed in the industry today versus when I was a novice because of what we didn't know, right? And so it's exciting when you think about the fact that you're able to empower a lot of people through the education of this fund, okay, and coming alongside and feeling comfortable, right?
Yeah.
Feeling comfortable is the key of working together, right? And I think that's the thing that people need to realize is we're at a very interesting time in the market space of musculoskeletal as a whole, okay? And I would say if I'm looking at what's going on from an investment standpoint, there's going to be so much activity exit-wise in the next 3 to 5 years in the space at the time that people should be considering seriously to partner up with somebody like you is now.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And I think that number one, you're right. And I think you think about right, musculoskeletal care is one of the largest subsets of, if you look at any value-based healthcare entity, any of the MA plans, and I had a lot of experience doing bundled payments and value-based healthcare, it's 30% of the spend. Like, so in these at-risk groups, and at-risk can be a Medicare Advantage plan or it could be a self-insured employer, right? That whole space is exploding. People are like backing into their own insurance. And guess what? They tend to have employees from 25 years of age to 50. And what do they got? They all have MSK problems, right? So there's not only the I think loosely defining med tech, including the devices, but also the technology that helps us deliver the care better, even if it's something as unglamorous as a super cool inventory management tool for your practice or a scheduling tool that has specific parameters around the intake for your MSK practice. That stuff is blowing up. That stuff is coming up like crazy. And so I like to broaden that definition of med tech to not just be the widget that goes in your elbow, your spine, your neck, but to also include the widgets that are going to help us, because we're all patients at some day, help our doctors and our patients and our offices communicate better, share information. That is what I took away from that LSI meeting, is that the definition of med tech is broadening and it doesn't always include an implant.
True.
Yeah.
True. And I think something you just hit on made me think that we hold a lot of the impact of cardio, right, as it relates to treatment for the heart and treatment for this and treatment for that. But you know what? It really comes back to, we got to keep people moving. Mm-hmm. Then you'll need that less. So address the musculoskeletal side first to keep people moving.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, for sure. What is your investment thesis? It's like, I know your head's down right now raising your fund, and maybe you're not actively making investments, but you must have a thesis that you've thought through. Check size, round, stage. Have you thought that through, and do you have something you can share with us on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just as a pure shameless plug, first of all, thank you both for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation and getting the word out about what you're doing. I promise I'll do the same as you've been kind enough to do to me. But to answer your question, Mike, I've spent the summer raising our general partnership. And the way, just for the people who are listening who may not have experience, the general partners in a venture fund are the managers. We're the ones who have to do the work. We have to raise the money. We have to do the due diligence. We have to sit on the advisory committee. Then the limited partners are underneath, and those are all the investors. Again, all of us who are GPs are LPs, so we're all tied to the same outcome. But my general partners are a diverse group of physicians, and I did that purposefully. We've got women's health experts. We've got operators, physicians. Every GP has business, healthcare delivery, and usually operator or founder experience. We've geographically distributed them across the country, and we've mixed up the disciplines so we're well represented. After meeting with all of them and drilling down and talking to a lot of people like Chris and other people trying to figure out where this is going, what we see as the biggest opportunities are women's health. There's just a ton of non-dilutive grant funding, which when you learn your venture capital trade, non-dilutive grant funding is super helpful because it comes into the company, it gives them money, and it doesn't take equity out of the shareholders. So that's a great way, and there's a lot of that. And secondarily, it's a really important space. It's an underrepresented area of healthcare delivery, and it's time to resolve that. Number two is low technology med device. So I mean that low risk, like class 1, class 2 FDA, things that can get through 510K approval, don't have to go through a full PMA, things that have CPT codes associated with them, but also are aiming at areas that may not be typically currently used. The collateral universe around big procedures is a good example. Things like TAVRs, interventional cardiology, wound care. Software as a medical device. You might have heard it here first now, SAMD, which are the AI-driven clinical decision assist tools that are all 510K. Those are going to come in and help the docs understand what are my treatment options. They're not going to make the decision, but they're going to tee up things, especially with the healthcare shortage and physicians. Yeah. The primary care docs can't know everything. And their normal response is if you have a complex spine problem or any spine problem, refer them to the spine doc. If you have a heart problem, refer them to the cardiologist. Every specialist is delayed 6 to 7 months. So these docs can't keep filling that up. So they have to know, what can I do? Step 1, step 2, step 3. Those software as a medical device, clinical assist tools will help tee up some treatment options that they can at least decide to do on their own. The last is also the non-glamorous stuff I alluded to, workflow efficiency. If you look at healthcare, it's probably the largest industry in the US, but it's the most fragmented. So our offices do a terrible job of delivering care in terms of scheduling, making appointments. We hand you a clipboard when you come in the office. A Post-it note is on my computer if the staff wants me to learn that there's an urgent issue. So the workflow solutions that add efficiency to the doctor's offices, the supply chain guys managing their inventory, how they might get things from product inventory to market. We see a lot of opportunity, again, AI-driven technologies that are springing up. Our investments will be seed Series A, so $150,000 to $500,000 checks. We'll keep 30% of our capital back for follow-on investments. We'll deploy in the first 2 to 3 years of the fund, and then the fund ends at 10 years. So it's a traditional 2 and 20 venture fund, 10-year life cycle.
That's great.
So Paul, thanks so much for your time. This was really compelling and interesting. I think our listeners will learn a lot, whether you're a surgeon, you're an investor, or you're a MedTech company. Where can people find you, Paul?
I'm pretty easy to find. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can just find me on LinkedIn if that's convenient. I'm trying to get a little bit more. It's on my to-do list to get my message out a little bit more. So this is very good practice and motivation for me to start providing information that may not be evident to other people. So LinkedIn is a good place, but we just actually launched our brand new website. So I would love it if people would go on our website, which is PhyCap, PhyCapFund.com, which stands for Physicians Capital. And just a final point, again, as I may have mentioned earlier, our fund is anchored by physicians. We think that's important. I believe in trying to restore physician autonomy and agency through venture capital and entrepreneurship. I believe that it will help with physicians who are burning out, just tied to the RVU wheel, more and more patients. If you want to try to do something in parallel that both stimulates you and creates a potential career pathway in parallel to being a good physician, venture capital and MedTech investing, advising, counseling, et cetera, is a great way to leverage your really important skills as a physician, surgeon, et cetera, into an area that is blowing up, that is really expanding rapidly. So PhyCapFund.com or LinkedIn. So you can reach out to me either place. We're easy to find. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks so much. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Well, thanks for joining us and for another great episode of the MedTech Jam Session. Hit us up wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple or Spotify. Look for us soon on the YouTube machine, and like us and find us on LinkedIn as well. Thanks for listening to the MedTech Jam Session with Chris and Mike D. We'll see you on the other side.
Peace.
Thanks, guys.